And we can be grateful for the opportunity to not only still be alive, still be breathing in and out, but also to have the company of like-minded people. Because when we're not in the right circumstances with a certain kind of people, then it's very easy to get totally distracted and go astray in all kinds of ways. So to be in the right place with the right people, this is something very fortunate and unusual, one might say. I mean, how many people do we think in this vast city of Delhi of 22, 23 million people? How many right now, or at any point today, were really in the company of people who were intent on some kind of inner investigation based on positive intention, and who also had the circumstances, the facilities to be able to nurture that? Very few people. So we're most fortunate. We can rejoice in the positive causes that must have occurred for this result to be obtained. And we can also, of course, remember the vast majority of beings who don't have this kind of opportunity and who are basically lost, actually. Beings are lost. I received a message today from a friend in Romania who's quoting somebody. I just want to read it because it just gives an idea of how most people are just caught up in a very distressing and confused, stagnant kind of situation. Social contagion is here to stay. There's too much pain, too much tragedy, too much fear, too much anger, too much resentment for people to just sit back and look at the facts. Checking the facts takes too much energy and people are tired. Takes too much time and people don't have too much of that. It takes too much thinking and people are overwhelmed with information and disinformation at every turn. So this doesn't leave much space, you see, for proper discrimination, vivek, for proper ability to really find the right way, find the right path. you could say, let alone be guided properly on that path. So beings are bereft, you see, of help, of refuge, of the guidance of a proper, wise guide. I mean, imagine being in a place where you are sick and there are no good doctors. Imagine that, or no doctors at all, you know. Well, doctors, but they don't really know how to treat you, and they're just interested in money, and basically they are quacks. They don't know how to treat you. Imagine being in such a situation. So then, much worse than that, imagine being in a situation where you realize that the mind, one's mind, is the source of one's happiness and one's suffering, and one is suffering, and one is confused, upset, tormented by various delusions, and there is no guide. Imagine there is no guide. There's no one to help you, no one to give loving, wise advice. Nobody at all. What's that like? And most people are in this situation. And even worse, in a sense, most people, or many people, are not aware that they could benefit a great deal from such a guide, you know. They're just caught up in their habitual lives, patterns. And they have no way of putting their suffering, their problems in a proper context, and let alone utilizing those difficult situations to generate positive energy and renunciation. They don't have any, they haven't realized how to do that. So they're lost. And remember, you see, from the point of view of the Buddha Dharma, all these beings who are lost and suffering and without help or guide, they've all been very kind. They all want to be happy, just like you and me. They're no different in that respect, and they've all been most kind to me. It's as though one may have been, you know, brought up by some parents, and then at a very young age, one was separated from them. And then you meet them 20, 30 years later at some event, these people, and you have no idea who they are. You have no idea who they are. You don't have any special feeling for them. But, you know, they were your parents. They gave birth to you and looked after you for some time. In the same way, everyone we meet, according to Lord Buddha, has been very kind to us in the past. Most kind. The kindness of a mother, a father, helper, and so forth. And of course, none of us know the faces, let alone the names of the farmers and all the other people who produce the food that we ingested, we ate today. We don't know these people. We don't even know which district of India they live in, most probably. But they're there, and they're helping us. Through their kindness, we are surviving. So spend some time generating a sense of sadness and gratitude and loving kindness towards the multitude of living beings, including animals, of course, so many of whose bodies are taken without their consent for food. And then we can reflect that although we may really want to help in some way a few beings as much as we can, at the moment our ability to do so is greatly hindered by the lack of skillful means, the lack of wisdom, the lack of discipline, loving kindness, compassion within our minds. So we need to begin by creating some kind of stability in this very, very fickle mind that jumps around like inebriated, drunken monkey or mad elephant. Creating havoc much more than any wild animal. And remembering the advice of Shantideva, which is also, of course, on our staircase here at Tushita, halfway up, halfway down, that those who wish to guard their practice should very attentively guard their minds. Those who don't guard their minds will be unable to guard their practice. And in fact, the quote on the staircase is, however, if the elephant of my mind is firmly bound on all sides by the rope of mindfulness, all fears will cease to exist. All virtues will come into my hand. So in that spirit, with that understanding, we'll sit quietly together for a while and watch our breath, be aware of our breath as it enters and leaves our body, either through the nostrils, or if it's easier, then the sensation, the abdomen rising and falling as we breathe in and out. And there should be a sense of stillness, a sense of being at ease, comfortable and relaxed, not uptight. And together with that, also alert, awake, attentive. When we notice distractions, we can gently, in a relaxed fashion, notice, let them go, and come back to the breath. There's no tension necessary in any of these steps. The more attentive and also relaxed we are, then it's easier. And one might say that if it's overall within the context of a sense of kindness and affection towards oneself and others, then the whole practice becomes perhaps very rich, very tasty, as Rinpoche sometimes would say. So let's sit together quietly for some time, engaging in this practice. Take a moment if you need to stretch or stand. Yeah, somebody started recording for me. Maybe Nidit or somebody.
I just got a message.
It's recording, yeah. So chapter 3 of Shantideva, let's look at some verses. It doesn't matter if you don't have the text, I'll read a few verses. Then we'll engage in a practice which involves the 8 verses of training the mind, which the text you have in front of you, together with mantra of Avalokitesvara, Buddha of compassion. This is a practice that I think it's probably an old practice, but Lama Zopa Rinpoche definitely engaged, had us engage in this practice. The text he brought out. Yeah. So the first verse of chapter 3 says, "Gladly do I rejoice in the virtue that relieves the misery of all those in unfortunate states and that gives happiness to the suffering." And there's an interesting commentary by somebody called Paramananda Sharma, which came out. He is basing his commentary on classical, an ancient Indian Pandit who commented on the Bodhicitta called Prajna Karmati. So this is what he has to say just about this first verse, which is interesting. It's always interesting to have elaborations of various verses, if one has time. So we can do this with 1 or 2 verses, maybe. So he says, Shantideva now proceeds to elaborate on what is virtue or punya, because he's rejoicing in the virtue, you see, that relieves our misery. There are those, he says, who suffer untold miseries in various hells, and when these unfortunate beings, tired of their sins and sufferings, start practicing virtue, it becomes a matter of joy for the Bodhisattva, as these beings too start attaining happiness as the result of meritorious conduct. This joy, then this is interesting, this joy or happiness is threefold: bodily, mental, and oral. Bodily joy is indicated by such signs as, this word I've never heard of, horripilation, romaharsh. It could be something like hair standing on end, something like that. Sujitji will tell us later. I should have checked what it meant. Anyway, horripilation seems to have something to do with the skin and the hairs on the skin. Romaharsh in Hindi, apparently. Tears, Ashrupat, and body trembling, Gata Anukampana. Gata Anukampana. And then there's a mental sense of joy, a pervading sense of calm and equilibrium that overpowers the mind. And also oral, when through speech, words of joy and expressions of delight involuntarily escape the lips. Shantideva prays that may those who are suffering the tortures of hell attain happiness through the practice of merit or virtue. And he's saying all the three paths that he mentions in the next verse are paths of virtue that lead to various different states of happiness. So the awakening of the arhats, also in the awakening of the bodhisattvas, the spiritual children of the Buddhas. All of these are paths of punya. And to the extent that they teach methods of reducing human suffering in order to lessen the sorrows of samsara, they're instrumental in conferring joy on the bodhisattvas. You see, Shantideva is rejoicing in all of this. It's like, a kind person who's taken responsibility for somebody else, maybe a parent or a friend or whatever. And when that other person creates positive energy, then they get very happy. आपके समझ में आ रहा था ये सब? अच्छा, हम सोचे कि भाषण के कारण आपको नहीं ठीक. Thank you, take care. So so rejoicing in the awakening of the Buddhas, the awakening of the bodhisattvas, all of these are causes for great rejoicing. I mean, we rejoice when if we buy somebody ice cream and they say, "Oh, I like that flavor," then we feel happy. Oh, we rejoice at things like that, which is good, of course. But to rejoice in actions of others that is creating deeper kind of happiness, causes for deeper kind of happiness. That is, the bodhisattvas rejoice in that. Yeah. And of course, we can rejoice. We don't have to be bodhisattvas to rejoice. We can rejoice in anything that we see. Sometimes you are in the street and somebody just out of the blue starts being kind to an animal or gives some money to a beggar or something, and somehow it's kind of nice and one can rejoice at that. One can be happy that person has done that, One can really rejoice. And one could be elaborate about it. One could feel that by doing that, may that being, generate the causes for enlightenment and so forth. And may the person receiving that, may they find happiness and go from happiness to happiness. Yeah. And then some beautiful verses, which Geshe-la has students recite as they light the candles, butter lamps, the lamps at Tibet House before he teaches there. With folded hands, I beseech the Buddhas of all directions to shine the lamp of Dharma for all bewildered in misery's gloom. How much we rejoice when there's a long path cut in Delhi, yeah? And somebody has a candle, they bring a candle or some lamp, and we feel very happy that we can see things and carry on with what we're doing. So how much more so when we are caught up with misery, depression, all of those things, various kinds. When somebody shines the lamp of Dharma, the lamp of good advice, good understanding, something that really helps us. It's so wonderful. We feel so happy. So this is what the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are doing continuously. And we make sure that we are recipients of that by appreciating that, being grateful, and beseeching them to do that for everybody. And not only do that, but to stay around and not pass away into nirvana. With folded hands, I beseech the Buddhas who wish to pass away to please remain for countless eons and not to leave the world in darkness. Because if Buddhas, you see, if these beings who practice a lot and so forth were only motivated by the wish to attain nirvana, then that wouldn't be much use for us, because once they died, there would be no more connection with them. They could not guide us anymore. But the Bodhisattvas, as we know, and the Buddhas continuously guide and benefit the sentient beings. They don't pass away in that sense, out of this world into oblivion or somewhere where we can't contact them, or they can't contact us. And then, these verses are very simple sometimes, very simple English, but their meaning is really incredible. In verse 7, he says, "Thus by the virtue collected through all that I've done, may the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away." What an amazing thought. Sorry?
Which verse is this?
7. Yeah. You don't have it. You don't have it. This is in the text. It's okay. That is something we're doing later. Yeah. "Thus, by the virtue collected through all that I've done, may the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away." Yeah. So it's one thing to feel, okay, I'm studying to be a doctor or professor or something, and through that, I'll be able to help people understand history or, whatever. Or as a doctor, I'll be able to cure people of their diseases, maybe even some very heavy diseases, But here, he's saying that the virtue I've created, this amazing virtue based on bodhicitta, that is going to enable me to clear away every single suffering that living beings have, by helping them to become enlightened themselves. This is incomparable with any kind of worldly benefit that I can bestow on people. Absolutely, there's kind of no comparison. Yeah. And then he says, "May I be the doctor, the medicine, may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed." Wow. What a thought. May I be the doctor, the medicine, and the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. So the Buddha, of course, the doctor, the Dharma is the medicine, Sangha, like the nurses, helpers. So by introducing beings to the three jewels, three ratna, one can help beings in the best way, the most amazing way. Then when the next verse, which is something I think we could all have experienced, helping those, even, our friends or whoever, temporarily, however temporarily, help them clear away the pain of thirst and hunger. How satisfying it is to help somebody who's hungry or thirsty. So here, Shantideva is saying, "May a rain of food and drink descend to clear away the pain of thirst and hunger, and during the eon of famine, may I myself transform into food and drink." So this is the extraordinary kind of aspirations of the Bodhisattva, which it is said in very high Bodhisattvas, they can actually engage in some pretty incredible, almost magical transformations to help others. one is also reminded of the so-called miracle of the fish and the loaves that Christ engaged in, which is there in the New Testament. So bodhisattvas can do this kind of thing. And we are in already in an eon which has a lot of famine, although in our homes we may not recognize that, being well fed enough. But there are beings right now who are, of course, in the world who are undergoing famine. And if you take famine also to mean the famine of the hungry ghosts who never get any kind of satisfying morsel of food their whole lives, their whole suffering lives, then yeah, we are definitely in the eon of famine, which maybe according to the predictions, prophecies, whatever, can get worse before it gets better. So anyway, the Bodhisattva prays that at those times, may I become food and drink for people. Not just buy them food and drink. May my body transform into food and drink. One is reminded also of the sacrifice of the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, with the tigress. He didn't transform. Well, in one way, yeah, he transformed his body, which he could use for his worldly enjoyments. He transformed it into food for the tigress and her 5 starving cubs. May I become an inexhaustible treasure for those who are poor and destitute. May I turn into all things that they could need and be placed close beside them without any sense of loss. I shall give up my body and enjoyments as well as my virtues of the past, present, and future for the sake of benefiting everyone. Amazing. He's willing to give up everything. The Bodhisattva happily gives up everything for everybody. As, you know, whatever is meaningful and skillful to do. Yeah, Bodhisattva wouldn't transform themselves into rice and dal for somebody who was totally, reliant and needed, meat or something else. So, whatever is necessary, whatever is appropriate for others, the Bodhisattva prays to do. And this is a verse, these are verses Rinpoche liked to remind us of in his teachings on Bodhicitta and the Bodhisattva attitude. By giving up everything, sorrow is transcended, and my mind will realize the sorrowless state. It is best that I now give everything to all beings in the same way that I shall have to at death. At death, everything I own, everything I am will be given up. Without our choice. Someone will get it. Or, yeah, even our money. If it's in a bank account and we haven't made a will, then I guess relations or friends don't get it, then the government gets it. Somebody else gets it, So it's better we now imagine that we're giving away all of everything to everybody. Mentally, we don't hold on to anything. So having given up this body for the pleasure of all living beings, by killing, abusing, beating it, may they always do as they please. Again, this requires some interpretation, but basically it's this attitude that, look, I'm not going to cling to this body as mine and jealously guard it all the time. I'm going to make it available for others, however they want. Although they may play with my body, make it a source of jest, reproach, because I've given it up to them, what's the use of holding it dear? Therefore, I shall let them do anything to it that does not cause them any harm, any karmic harm. And when anyone encounters me, may it never be meaningless to them. So lovely. Well, a lot of... of this verse. I just, yeah, what's that?
So, I mean, in the real world, there are people who want to exploit it.
Yes.
So, I mean, if you allow people to do whatever they want, walk over you,
Yes.
it's difficult. That's a difficult situation for the individual yourself, understand.
Bilkul. One shouldn't let them do that. Yes, he says here, no, I shall let them do anything to it, to my body, that does not cause them any harm, meaning karmic harm. So if they harm me, they're harming themselves, karmically speaking. So he also means that. And of course, the kind of, he is deliberately saying something that seems like an extreme, because I think we have been following an extreme for so long, guarding ourselves, taking care of ourselves so much. So he's, because the previous verse was even worse, by killing, abusing, beating it, may they always do as they please. Does he really mean that? Not really, because if they torture me and hurt me, they're creating terrible karma, especially if I'm a bodhisattva. You see, to harm a bodhisattva is incredibly harmful for the being. So he doesn't want people to create negative karma. But the attitude is, look, I've been holding on to this thing and taking care of it. I'm number one. I don't care for others. Now let's reverse, turn the tables, let others treat me as their slave, as their property, because that's what I've been doing to others up to now, using other people.
So then how they are not creating the negative karma if they are doing that?
Which one?
No, anything, killing, abusing, beating it, or like using it in any.
As I just
way
said,
like
it's
this.
he's just making us, I think he's just trying to wake us up, I think he's trying to wake us up. Sometimes giving lectures or this, people get sleepy, and we are kind of sleepy in our lives, just going through the same thing again and again. He's trying to wake us up and say, look, let people kill you, beat you, and you kind of wake up. Oh, what does he mean? Does he really mean that? But what Lama Yeshe once said is, if someone is trying to kill you, somebody asked him after teaching, if someone is trying to kill you, will you kill them? Will you try and defend yourself and kill them? And he said, I would rather they just kill me. I don't want to have to try and kill them. I would rather that person killed me. So, it's about what we're holding on to, really, I think. So you don't have to take it literally, because I know through experience how late Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche was very careful with people he knew who got angry easily. He would not do and say things to them which he knew would make them angry at him. Because to get angry at your guru or someone like Rinpoche, very negative, awful karma for that person. So he would be very careful. He could give hints to people, and some people, he was very careful, very careful. And you see, the Bodhisattva prays because there are people who are going to be angry to you, So this is what Shantideva is addressing in the next verse. If in those who encounter me a faithful or an angry thought arises, may that eternally become the source for fulfilling all their wishes. He knows that if people get angry with him, it's negative for them, but he's praying, really aspiring, praying that, through my prayers, through my whatever, may that person actually benefit through having that contact with me. And it is possible that long-term they could benefit. Short-term, no, they would have to experience the karma of harming or getting angry at a bodhisattva. But due to that connection with the holy being, bodhisattvas considered a holy being because of the mind of Bodhicitta. So may they long-term, benefit. May they benefit in the long term, just through having had a connection with me. Rinpoche says, for example, that if even if somebody, who is dying, let's say, and they're not Buddhist, they don't particularly like Buddha even, and you show them pictures of Buddha and they get a bit angry, or you recite mantra, they get a bit angry even. But don't worry, that long-term, the benefit outdoes the short-term harm of being angry at seeing things that they aren't particularly interested in, So one could argue that even historically, the people who broke up monasteries and destroyed Buddha images and cut off the noses of Buddha images are long-term due to the power of the object and the compassion of the Buddhas and their aspirations. Those beings have at least made a connection, you see, with the Buddha, even in that negative way, one might think. So long-term, maybe there's benefit. Anyway, this is what he is praying for. May all those who say bad things to me or cause me any other harm, those who mock and insult me, may they have the fortune to fully awaken. Matlab, awaken to Buddhahood. We could also say it might mean short-term to awaken to the fact that, oh boy, I shouldn't behave like this, this is not good. But he, I think, means long-term wake up. May I be a protector? Again, this is all these verses. It's worth going through them. They're so wonderful and written, after all, by Shantideva, who's a bodhisattva. So they are very powerful, blessed verses. May I be I wish I could read the Sanskrit, which is written here in this other book. And most of us might not understand that. I wouldn't. May I be a protector for those without one, a guide for all travelers on the way. May I be a bridge, a boat, and a ship for all those who wish to cross the water. May I be an island for those who seek one, and a lamp for those desiring light. May I be a bed for all who wish to rest, and a slave for all who want a slave. May I be a wishing jewel, a magic vase, powerful mantras, great medicine. May I become a wish-fulfilling tree and a cow of plenty for the world. Then this extraordinary verse, just like space and the great elements, such as the earth, may I always support the lives of all the boundless creatures. And until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach to the ends of space. Then the verses which are often used in the Bodhicitta ceremony, when one is taking the Bodhicitta, the Bodhisattva vows, just as the previous Buddhas gave birth to an awakening mind, just as they successively dwelt in the Bodhisattva practices, likewise, for the sake of all that lives, do I give birth to an awakening mind, and likewise shall I too successively follow the practices. Yeah. So those verses are very famous. I'll repeat them. Just as the previous Swagatas gave birth to an awakening mind, just as they successively dwelt in Bodhisattva practices, likewise, for the sake of all that lives, do I give birth to an awakening mind. Likewise shall I too successively follow the practices. So, and then in order to increase that mind from now on, he says one should praise it in the following manner. It's not enough to generate bodhicitta or this aspiration. You have to keep on creating the cause for it to grow. You might have a beautiful plant in your house. Someone gives you a plant or you grow a plant. You have to keep on, taking care of it, making sure it grows better and better, healthier and healthier, bigger and bigger, and so forth. So today, my life has borne fruit. Having well obtained this human existence, I've been born in the family of the Buddha, and now I am one of Buddha's children. Thus, whatever actions I do from now on must be in accord with that lineage, that family. Never shall I disgrace or pollute this noble and unsullied race. Just like a blind man discovering a jewel in a heap of rubbish, likewise, by some coincidence, an awakening mind has been born within me. It's the supreme ambrosia that overcomes the sovereignty of death. It's the inexhaustible treasure that eliminates all poverty in the world. It's the supreme medicine that quells the world's disease. It is the tree that shelters all beings, wandering and tired on the path of conditioned existence. That is very powerful. If we knew, if we had any inkling, if we had clairvoyance, and we had any idea of how much we had been wandering and tired on the path of conditioned existence, habitual patterns motivated by delusion and karma, if we had any idea about that, we would be so glad, so delighted to have a tree-like person who could shelter us and show us the way, show us how to understand the power of our own mind and help awaken the Buddha nature. So like a sheltering tree also, of course, in India, that becomes very meaningful in the heat, to have a beautiful neem tree or peepal or bargad. These trees have marvelous shade. So to be like a tree. So Bodhicitta is like that tree. It shelters wandering, tired beings. Endlessly wandering. Yeah? It's the universal bridge that leads to freedom from unhappy states of birth, and it is the dawning moon of the mind that dispels the torment of disturbing conceptions. Yeah, disturbing conception, klesh, nyomong in Tibetan, disturbing conception. It's a mental factor that upon occurring in the mind has the function of producing turmoil in and a lack of control over the psyche. Conception should not be understood in the limited sense of intellectual thought, but in a wider sense of any subjectively conditioned mental response, whether emotional, such as in attachment, hatred, or pride, or intellectual, such as in mistaken views and doubts, etc. Anyway, Bodhicitta is like a great sun that finally removes the misty ignorance of the world, and it is like the quintessential butter from the churning of the milk of the Dharma. So for all those guests traveling on the paths of conditioned existence who wish to experience the bounties of happiness, this will satisfy them with joy and actually place them in supreme bliss. Today, in the presence of all the protectors, I invite the world to be guests at a festival of temporary and ultimate delight. May gods, demigods, and all be joyful. So we've spoken several times about the meaning of guest, host, and guest. To be a good host to beings, that is the aspiration of the Bodhisattvas, that all beings become my guests. I can help them, treat them well, set them on their way. So it's interesting that he asks gods and demigods to be joyful, because traditionally the gods are so absorbed in their bliss, their meditations, they're not interested, to rejoice, and the demigods are definitely not interested to rejoice, because their main disturbing emotion is competitiveness, is envy, jealousy, and so forth. So he's asking them, hey, you guys also, you must rejoice. You must rejoice at this kind of mind that is being discussed here. This is a wonderful chapter, especially after the previous one, which is a bit of a downer, where Shantideva was talking a lot about negative karma and death. and the terror of being led to the torture chamber with a dry mouth and dreadful sunken eyes and so forth. This is a different note that he strikes in this chapter. Okay. So I thought we can have possibly some short discussion at the end, but we can engage in a short practice which involves the 8 verses of training the mind. Sorry, I forgot to send it online. Anyway, well, I'll read each verse anyway, and then we'll recite the mantra of Avalokitesvara, Om Mani Padme Hum. And as we do so, we'll be visualizing Avalokitesvara, Buddha of compassion, light and nectar coming from Avalokitesvara, cleansing us of all of the factors that prevent us from actualizing the meaning of the verse that we've just recited. So all the factors, and there are many, that are obstacles in us realizing that verse, we are washed away, cleansed completely by the power of the wisdom and compassion enshrined in that mantra of the Buddha of compassion. Of course, we say Buddha of compassion, but all Buddhas have compassion, all Buddhas have wisdom, all Buddhas have skillful means, but certain archetypes, if you like, for our benefit, Buddhas can manifest in different forms to help us awaken different qualities, specific qualities. So anyway, Avalokitesvara, Chenrezik in Tibetan, symbolizes the manifest compassion of all the Buddhas. And we can visualize Avalokitesvara, either the 4-armed version or 1,000-armed, or if that's difficult, you can just imagine a source of light, a very, very warm kind of light, which is the embodiment of love and compassion. The very name Avalokitesvara, of course, from the Sanskrit or Hindi, Avalokan Karna, to observe. So Avalokitesvara observes all of us with tremendous affection and kindness, tremendous compassion, seeing clearly, even clearer than we do, our suffering and the causes of it, and how we may be remedied of it. Only Buddhas can see those factors clearly. We are so hallucinated, benumbed, bewitched by confusion and sorrow, misery, we don't see clearly like the Buddhas. So we imagine there's that kind of being. And of course, this practice, it can be incorporated by anybody. I remember a beautiful text, Silent Mind, Holy Mind, Lama Yeshe's teachings one Christmas to his newly converted, you might say, Western disciples, most of whom were from Christian backgrounds. So he told them in some teachings he gave at, I think, Kopan Monastery, probably, that, they didn't have to visualize Buddha, they could visualize Jesus Christ or whoever. His Holiness Dalai Lama was always talking about Mother Mary, and about how one time when he was on pilgrimage, he's convinced that the statue of Mary, Mother Mary, somewhere it was smiled at him, was smiling at him. Possible. Anyway, so we can visualize whatever is meaningful for us, symbolizes great compassion, love. And we'll go through the verses. We may not understand every verse, it doesn't matter. We can look at them more deeply another time. But the last two, I might briefly explain something. So imagine we are surrounded by living beings. who are suffering, mother, father, friends, relations, living or dead, mother or father, but do visualize the parents if we know them. And then the beings like friends, relations, enemies, enemies meaning, people we don't like. Or we may not have a problem with them, but they don't like us, whatever, those kind of beings. Remember how they're all bereft of refuge, bereft of proper guide, and how, from a Buddhist perspective, at the time of death, there will be tremendous suffering, and that the vast majority of beings do not have happy rebirths. That is clear from the numbers of beings we can see. The animals and insects far outnumber humans, and the other realms apparently outnumber animals and insects. So these beings who are bereft, who are like in darkness without any light, hungry and thirsty without any food or drink, Avalokitesvara, who is of course none other than the seed of compassion, the potential of compassion in our own minds, seeing this, tremendous compassion arises. How wonderful if one could be of some help to the beings. So I think I'm going to generate a very powerful, courageous mind of the Bodhisattva, which is what all our great gurus want us to do. They're most happy when we do that. I'm going to do it by reflecting on the 8 verses of thought transformation by the great Bodhisattva Langri Tangpa Dorje Sengye, and combining that with recitation of mantra and descent of light and nectar purification. Okay, so I'll read the verse, and then we imagine the light and nectar is flushing out everything that, all the qualities that prevent us, all of the unwholesome qualities that prevent us actualizing the meaning of the verse and practicing it. With a determination to achieve the highest aim for the benefit of all sentient beings who surpass even a wish-fulfilling gem, may I hold them dear at all times. Matlab, if I take care of beings, beings are the object of my compassion. By generating compassion, I become a Buddha. So I depend on others to generate compassion, you see. And this bodhicitta mind far surpasses, of course, any ordinary wish-fulfilling gem, which is said to have been a gem that bestows all worldly delights and possessions that one could wish for. So beings totally surpass any kind of wish-fulfilling gem. Om mani padme hum. 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 mani pe me ho. Om 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 mani pe me. Om mani pe me. Om mani. So all my indifference, my neglect, my contempt sometimes, ignoring of sentient beings, all that being purified. Om mani pe me. Second verse. Whenever I interact with somebody, may I view myself as the lowest amongst all. And from the very depths of my heart, may I respectfully hold others as superior, as supreme. This is clear. Usually we are so full of ourselves, we automatically think somehow we are special. And anyway, this purifies that self-centeredness and helps us generate respect, great respect for others. Om mani pe me ho. 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 Om mani pe me. So we can focus now more on the rapid and more silent mantra recitation. Om mani pe me ho. Om mani pe. Om mani pe. Om mani pe. Om. Much light and nectar is coming from Avalokitesvara, totally infusing every cell of our body, mind, completely being cleansed of all the impurities. Om. And the third verse, which is incredibly important in our day-to-day practice to prevent us going astray. In all my deeds, may I probe into my mind, and as soon as mental and emotional afflictions arise, as they endanger myself and others, may I strongly confront them and avert them. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme. Om Mani Padme Hum. Fourth verse. So here it's getting more and more challenging practice. When I see beings of unpleasant character, oppressed by strong negativity and suffering, may I hold them dear, for they are rare to find, as if I had discovered a jewel treasure. So here, we meet beings sometimes very negative, they harm us, but we also see how they are suffering, and we realize how it's quite rare to meet people who are very, very, very negative and who harm us a lot. Can be quite rare. So we're very grateful to meet them, and we regard them as a jewel treasure, because in the practice of bodhicitta, these are the beings that I need to also have compassion for. They're the ones who test whether my compassion is just skin deep or heartfelt. Repeat the verse one more, goes on line. When I see beings of unpleasant character, oppressed by strong negativity and suffering, may I hold them dear, for they are rare to find, as if I had discovered a jewel treasure. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme. The fifth verse. When others, out of jealousy, treat me wrongly with abuse, slander, and scorn, may I take upon myself the defeat and offer to others the victory. Later. So here, you see, usually we want to have the victory. We don't want to accept anything without, someone hits us, we want to hit them back or hit them back twice. So here, the attitude is no, I've been retaliating beginninglessly, since beginningless time, and it hasn't done me any good. It certainly doesn't help me to generate this very precious mind of bodhicitta. So here I'm going to accept the defeat and be open to offering the victory to others. Because others, you see, are often tormented by their own suffering, such as envy, jealousy, which is a very powerful negative emotion that disturbs the mind. So they are suffering. So I'm not going to retaliate. I'm going to accept the defeat, as it were, offer others the victory. I'm not always going to have the last word or retaliate with, physical or verbal abuse, or even in my mind. I'm not going to harbor nasty thoughts for such beings. Next verse, very powerful. Actually, it happens a lot. I would imagine parents have this problem very often. When someone whom I have helped or in whom I have placed great hopes mistreats me in extremely hurtful ways, may I regard him still as my precious teacher. Matlab, whoever harms us in response to the kindness I've shown them, I don't retaliate again. I say, wow, this is really my teacher. This person is teaching me patience more than anybody could, more than the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, of course, more than the people who helped me. This person is teaching me patience, to develop inner strength, courage in the face of adversity. So for sure, I have to regard this person as my guru. Hmm. Visualize that also the beings around us, the mother, father, friends, relation, they're also being purified. All of that unwholesomeness, and all of their self-cherishing attitude and so forth. Om Mani Padme. The next verse refers to a specific practice in the Bodhisattva tradition of taking and giving, which is a practice utilizing the breath, where one imagines taking on all the sufferings of others as we breathe in, and as we breathe out, giving others all the happiness, all our happiness, all goodness. So taking on, and this is called taking and giving. So it's referring to this practice, because usually we want what is best for ourselves. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to take on any pain. We want, if others suffer, it's okay. So here we're reversing that. We're deliberately, with compassion, willing to take on the burden of others, the suffering of others, and with the out-breath, with love, with the wish for them to be happy, we send out everything that beings need with the out-breath, in the form of light or actual objects, things that beings need. So this taking and giving practice is very important in the Mahayana tradition. In brief, may I offer benefit and joy to all my mothers, both directly and indirectly, and may I quietly take upon myself all the hurts and pains of my mothers. So we offer benefit and joy, and we quietly, that means modestly and not making a fuss about it or advertising it, quietly take upon oneself the hurts and pains of our mothers. So this very, total reversal of the normal attitude, right? Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme. Om Mani Padme Hum. Then in the last verse, there's mention of the 8 worldly concerns and allusion to the practice of recognizing ultimate truth, emptiness, through seeing everything like an illusion, and to be free of the clinging, therefore. So the 8 worldly concerns, 8 mundane concerns mentioned in the next verse are being attached to pleasure and not wanting pain, to be attached to gain, not wanting loss, to be attached to praise and hating blame, to be attached to good reputation and strenuously trying to avoid and hating having a bad reputation. All of these worldly concerns interfere with our pure practice of the path and definitely our practice of bodhicitta. And so that is there. And also may we realize that we are not as independent or solid as we think. We are dependent, interdependent on others. We are dependent on all the constituents that make up who we are as a person, the bodily and the mental constituents. And nothing exists solidly from its own side. Everything depends on something else, just as we depend on others. And what is appearing to us is not the reality. What is appearing is something very solid and somehow real from its own side, independent, but that's not how things exist. So this verse is very important because we don't have this understanding of how things exist. We cannot develop perfect bodhicitta, cannot become liberated, let alone a Buddha. So it's very important to recognize the 8 worldly concerns and to create the causes to understand emptiness. So anything that interferes with that, we purify. Om mani padme hum. 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 Om mani padme. Imagine that anything that interferes with our understanding, our practice and accomplishment of all of these verses completely purified, completely washed away. For ourselves as well as the other mother sentient beings. Avalokitesvara dissolves into us. Feel a sense of oneness with all the Buddhas. Dedicate all of this to the quick return of Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. We'll recite a prayer and then one question here, and there could be some brief discussion. This was written by Kadrula on a flight from India to Nepal in the days shortly after Rinpoche's passing. Lama, you know, I beg you to listen to me, gentle root Lama. I appeal to you with a sudden desperate request. Do not deprive us of your compassionate refuge. Lama, you are the blessings of the Buddhas of the three times. Even though you are now in the great pervasive bliss of the unobstructed sphere of clear light, it is now that we need your great compassion. Quickly emanate the supreme body of the transcendental wisdom emanation from the various emanations of the dance of the great compassion of the Supreme Mind. Arise, rise, return from the sphere of the Dharmakaya. I invoke you, I invoke you for the sake of beings. Do not remain in the pure land of the Dakinis and other pure lands. Please return at once to make the scriptural and realization teachings flourish, the sentient beings of the world to the south. Come back right away, because the desperate beings are kind and are desperately calling you. They want to see you. They want to be blessed in body, speech, and mind. We are the sentient beings hallucinated and confused by the conception of ignorance. In the sphere of the luminous emptiness of the three supreme bodies, we confess the samayas that we've degenerated. Let there be the auspiciousness of emptiness and compassion, the supreme auspiciousness of all auspiciousness. Let there be the auspiciousness of the quick meeting of the disciple and the Lama. By the power of the truth of unchanging reality, may the perfect reincarnation quickly appear. I, the Dakini, with pure faith and sorrow, weeping in despair, due to the blessings of the three roots, may the wishes of this beggar be fulfilled. Object, subject, and action in the sphere of the reality of luminosity and bliss. Ah. Is that gentleman here? The gentleman who was sitting there, has he left? His bag is there. Oh, okay. So thank you, everybody. If there's any discussion we can have briefly. good to see you all. Good to see some old friend. Thank you, Tia. And, everybody. Yes, yes. You had a question, sir?
I had my question on the fifth verse, but I find the last verse more interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Often that I don't have any work on the weekend space, especially. I I go to my contact list and randomly call my friends because I cannot sit at peace.
Right.
That kind of calmness is not. So
Join the
we
club,
talk about
yes.
Emptiness.
Yes.
So that thing is not there. The stillness. So how does one achieve that? It's not a one-day process, you know. How do we walk towards that?
Well, that's a huge question, but you could start by attending the Tushita morning meditations. You see, one has to gradually build up, I suppose, a habit. And the habit won't take root until we realize the disadvantages of being restless all the time and of never being able to stay still. So it's like anything. When you're sick, you're motivated to take medicine and rest. So when we are sick with, after a while, with all this running around and the mind running around especially, then we might decide, okay, let's try some, meditation, some practice. And then you might find you are building up a habit, doing 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. But of course, this last verse is not connected with that kind of stillness. The emptiness that is mentioned in the last verse is not about just stillness. It's about actually understanding how we exist. Understanding there are no discrete, independent, solid objects in the universe, including oneself. But of course, to understand that, one does need stillness first. You're right. One needs a calm, quiet mind. Otherwise, we just cannot focus properly, you see. We're like a flickering candle all the time. It doesn't give a constant light. So yeah, we need stillness, but then we need the realization of so-called emptiness, which shows us that nothing stands alone without being connected with myriad causes and conditions. Everything is relational, if you like. Nothing is independently existing. And although we look at things and people and houses and we think they're very solid and so forth, and that they're kind of standing from their own side, existing from their own side, they don't. There are a mass of interdependent relationships, right? And at the atomic level, there's an amazing something going on, dance going on, which does not resemble the superficial surface reality, right? Have you studied physics at all?
Yes.
So you know that. And if you study subatomic physics, you know very well what's going on. Yeah, so good. So you understand that although we get emotional and upset because of clinging on to things as real, actually, when we reflect, things aren't that real. They're not so solid. And of course, they're changing all the time. That helps to know that things are changing all the time. My own mind, other people's minds, buildings, houses, everything is changing, Body is changing. Weather is changing. Everything is changing. So that helps. That will help ultimately take the sting out of our daily life, and we'll be able to function much more relaxed way, not uptight, not holding on to things as so real and solid and therefore confrontational or whatever. So thank you for that question. It's a huge question. And stillness, calm abiding is a whole practice in itself with many causes and conditions for it to be successful, including having less wants, less desires, proper teachings, proper facilities, We need time on our hands to practice. It's not something that happens quickly. To really do that practice well, and so forth. But mainly, you see, there are many factors militating against it, aren't there, in our modern life? Most of all of us have that within arm's length from us right now, right? All our instruments make us quite busy and distracted. At least they do that for me. So, yeah, we just need a lot of different lifestyle. Need to not only reverse AI, but we need to reverse some other things. But anyway, maybe if I can be benign AI, can take care of all of us. So thank you very much. We dedicate again for the for the quick return of Rinpoche. But meanwhile, we have to use our own intelligence and authentic literature, and many, many great lamas still living, of course, His Holiness, and also we pray for their long lives, and for us never to be separated from the authentic path, especially the Mahayana path, which leads to full enlightenment. May we never be separated from that. May we never give up. And when problems arise, may we deal with them with compassion. So problems, internal problems, external problems, problematic people, whatever. May we generate more and more compassion. And thus, very, please, we want to please make our gurus and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas happy also, and all beings happy. This is the way. Oneself will naturally also find happiness, highest happiness. Thank you, everybody, those who lasted this 2-hour session. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tia. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Vishad, Neeraj, Neil, Apurva, Redmi Note 10 Pro, Navinji. Thank you so much. Thank you, Neeraj. Thank you very much. Yeah. Take care, everybody. Oh, so we have, of course, meditation session on Thursday. And on Friday, Buddha Purnima, we will be posting some things we'll be doing, some extra prayers maybe, morning and evening, I expect. And then on the 6th, we have Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi speaking on this very precious mind, developing bodhicitta. So that really not to be missed. You can come to Tushita, come to Tushita. Otherwise, it's online as well. Okay. So we have a good program lined up. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.